everyone, and welcome to Friend Diagram. This is the podcast where two friends catch up and find common ground between their favorite media. I'm Remy.
I'm Kat, and today we will be celebrating our 2-year podiversary by doing a top 5 on our favorite Friend Diagram picks. Warning, spoilers ahead.
Kat!
Remy! Happy
2 years! 2 years! 2 years!
Woo!
Woo!
Can you believe we've had a podcast for 2 years?
No, I can't believe we've done it, but it feels just as fun as it did in the very beginning, and I hope
if not
we
more
do
fun.
It.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
amazing.
No, I love it. I feel like we have great momentum now.
Mm-hmm.
We've had so many different ideas and projects that we've incorporated into the pod, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
And it feels really nice just having complete creative control over something that's just yours and my thing.
Totally. Yeah. And just good to have a weekly excuse to catch up on Zoom and hang out. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a great excuse to always be going and seeing something new and reading something new. I feel like I've gotten a lot more momentum to consume new things, which I have always had an issue with, where I'm like, I don't really feel like it. I'm always well, I should watch that because then I'll have something cool to talk about.
Yeah, you got to do it for the pod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've learned a lot. I feel like I've definitely become way more educated. There's still a long way to go, but definitely learning a lot more about film specifically, which has been really cool and exciting.
Oh, yeah. I know. I love learning stuff for the pod, and sometimes it feels overwhelming how many films there are in the world to see. I feel so behind. I will never catch up, but I also think we've made good progress, and it's just really fun to talk about resources and influential things that might spark interest in other people,
Yeah.
I just finished reading Making Movies by Sidney Lumet. He's a very famous, influential director who wrote this book, Making Movies, and it was really enjoyable and really fascinating. And my favorite chapter was the one about lenses and how lenses work. And I was like, Sidney, how do you make this so accessible? This is incredible. Thank you. Again.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Big Picture podcast is having a book club this summer, and the current book is Making Movies by Sidney Lumet, so I would highly recommend it to anyone that's interested. It's very accessible. It takes you through the entire process of making a film, from pre-production to the different aspects of production to post-production, all in sequence, which is,
that's awesome.
Very logical.
I might see if I can borrow that from you in August.
Absolutely, yeah. We can trade off when we go see Trap.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm super excited. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, and as you've been remastering a lot of episodes recently, and you were talking to me about how you feel like you've really grown as an editor as well.
Yeah. Gosh, if you're here from the beginning, you really suffered through some, and I'm sorry to you. I was doing my best. I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to watch a lot of YouTube videos and kind of figure out my pipeline and take notes and see what worked and what didn't work, and sometimes just toss it out and start from scratch. And yeah, I love editing, and I feel like it's definitely grown into something that I would love to do more for other podcasts. And I've been editing for the Rooted podcast for a while. We've had Em, the host of Rooted, on the podcast before. Twice, actually. We did a head-to-head on fungi in movies. And then we also did a watch party of Annihilation, which was super fun. And so editing her podcast has just been such a treat. I love getting to do something for work that I would do anyway, which is listen to podcasts and learn new things. Even her cursed plant facts, as she likes to call them. So yeah, and it's definitely fun to like get creative with some of the episodes. And yeah, so if you're looking for podcast editing services, reach out. I'm looking to take on clients eventually. But yeah, so editing has been really fun. And yeah, during this whole process too, you wrote a whole ass novel, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's not particular. It wasn't for the pod per se, but it's been another creative project that I've had going on in the background, and it's been fun to check in on that periodically on the pod.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I hope we get to do a writing retreat this fall.
Me too. And we can brainstorm new ideas for the pod as well.
Yes.
When I was looking back on our episodes, I was like, oh, that series was really cool. We should do like another type of series like that.
I know. I was thinking that today too. Maybe like a fall themed one would be fun, because last year we did summer.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we could do like a spooky season lineup or something.
A fall double feature lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, like maybe mid-October through Thanksgiving or something.
That could be really fun. I love it because I get to force you to watch something.
Yeah, I know.
Choose. That's it's so fun. Half of the best part.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today because I was like, oh, I saw a Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and I was like, I should watch that again.
Oh,
and it wasn't something I think I would have missed out on it if you hadn't like chosen that for that month's pick, because it came out like right before COVID, and I had like planned to see it in the theater and then just never got to it. So
yeah, I would have missed it. That was the last one on my schedule before Film Scene temporarily closed down. Love you, Film Scene. Miss you.
Oh, love you, Film Scene. I love them.
But yeah, let's do a special series for the fall. I think that'd be really fun.
That. Yeah. Yeah, and we should get Em back on here soon, too.
Yes, I also was going to suggest that as well. She will come up again on this episode.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. I know what your pick is. Oh, gosh. Perfect. Yeah. So I suggested this as kind of like an easy top 5 for our podiversary. Basically, the premise is that we're going to look back at some of our previous picks on the podcast and decide which make the top 5. I had a really hard time making this list because we've talked about so many good things. And I did kind of limit myself to not picking our most recent episodes because I'm very subject to recency bias. So I intentionally chose ones that were a little bit further back in our episode queue. But yeah, so we'll kind of chat about some of the ones that we previously covered, what we liked about it, what the general premise was, and what episode that was initially covered in. And those will be linked down in the show notes as well if you want to go check out any of the full discussions.
Yeah, I also found this to be sort of insane and daunting. I was like, I could never rank everything I've talked about on the show because I've talked about so many things that I love very, very much. And it's just absurd and futile to make a top 5 of them. So I sort of made a mixed list where I wanted to firstly represent all the different types of media that we cover. Mm-hmm. And also I factored in how fun the thing was to talk about that I included. And also tried to make sure I'm pulling in things that aren't super recent as well. Mm-hmm. So I tried to run the gamut there and get a somewhat representative sample of my picks that I've had on the pod over the past 2 years.
Yeah, totally. So who's going to go first?
I don't know. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Then I will tell you about my number 5 topic covered on the Friend Diagram podcast. And it is the novel Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
Oh, yes. I love that. We covered that. Yeah.
Way back in episode 10. So.
Wow.
A pretty early ep.
Mm-hmm. We did remaster that one recently, right?
You did. You remastered that. You covered Control. in the same episode.
Yeah, I can't remember what episode that was, but if you don't want to listen to the old one, just search in your Spotify and listen to the remastered one.
Yeah, look for the remastered one. Kat wants you to do that. But I chose this one because I think this is probably my favorite book that I've ever covered on the pod.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught it immediately as it was released in the summer of 2022, which is not always the case with me for books. But I didn't know anyone else that had read it at the time because it was brand new. And I just felt so passionately about it that I wanted to talk about it right away. Mm-hmm. And I love this book. If you haven't read it, it's loosely about two video game developers who are childhood friends who grow up into adult friends and have a complicated relationship that is enriched by the people around them in their families and in their video gaming development world. And it's an awesome book with some very unique chapters with unique structures and approaches, and I found it extremely creative in the gaming worlds that Gabrielle Zevin describes in different chapters, but always very thematically rich and emotionally resonant. And I've recommended it to so many people over the past 2 years. And I think it is worth a read for almost everyone. I think there's something to enjoy there for many, many people. So
yeah,
I absolutely recommend Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I know you've read it as well, Kat.
Yeah, I read that at your recommendation, and then I recommended it to my mom who read it. And we still talk about it every once in a while. We talk about specifically the mythical roads in LA that they kind of talk about in the book.
Yeah.
And
the tunnels.
We've talked about that a couple of times. It's funny that you brought that up because I took it off of my bookshelf the other day and put it on Scott's bedside table because I really want him to read it.
Ooh, I would love to know what he thinks of it.
Yeah. I think he would really enjoy it. And God, I loved that book. I think about, you know who also read it is our mutual friend.
Oh, yeah? Did she like it?
She loved it. She listened to it on audiobook, I think. But yeah, I cried so hard. I love that book. Wow. That book really moved me, and I wrote all over it because I just had so many thoughts that it was bringing to the surface. And I don't do that in all of my books, but I really love a book where I can have commentary in the margins with myself, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's one of those.
It's a great book. And it's a book that I visualized very vibrantly. Mm-hmm. Not all books are visually striking memories in my mind, but Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is one of those things because Gabrielle Zevin does such an incredible job of describing the different worlds and imbuing them with meaning. And it sticks in my memory in many, many good ways. And so that was definitely earned it a spot on this list.
Yeah. Great pick. I love starting out with that. My number 5 pick is the film Barbarian, which you actually covered, but then we later did an update. So I don't remember which episode you initially covered it in, but the update was episode 19. Mm-hmm. This was a 2022 film that was directed by Zach Kragers, and I loved this film. Basically it is kind of it starts as kind of a meet cute kind of film where two people end up at an Airbnb that had been double booked, and they decide to just stay in the same Airbnb because there's no hotels, but they end up sharing some wine and laughing and telling stories and realizing that they've got a lot in common. And so it's really cute. I love it. And then it turns quite sinister when they realize that they're not alone and that there's a really creepy basement.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend this film. I think about it a lot when I think about horror films that I've really enjoyed in like the last 5 years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
It was really scary. It was a great premise, really terrifying monsters, people. I think the casting was genius, casting Bill
Yes.
Skarsgård as like the Airbnb guy.
Mm-hmm.
But not the guy that owns the Airbnb, but the guy who is staying at the Airbnb with Georgina Campbell, because he played Pennywise in the new It franchise. And I think that just primes you to be like, this guy's going to be the creepy guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's totally not. And he does a really cute duvet performance.
You freaking love the duvet.
I love the duvet performance. It's amazing. Yeah, so that was great. Can't wait to see Bill Skarsgård in Nosferatu.
Me too.
But yeah, I think that it's just a really great film. I think I like Justin Long playing like a real slime ball. That was
so
fun.
slimy.
I've never seen that from him. And so I think he kind of gets typecasted more like wholesome, sweet boy kind of energy. And I really enjoyed seeing him get to be like just like a total narcissist asshole. 10 out of 10 performance. And I can't wait to see what Zach Cregger's does next.
Yeah. I am so glad you chose this because it just missed my list. I wanted to represent how much fun it was for me to see it and then tell you about it and then have your reaction as well on the pod because I freaking love this film. It's one of my favorite films of 2022. And I am so excited to see what Zach Cregger does next. I think this was so promising. I can't wait to see his future projects. I loved this movie, and I've also been thinking about it a lot lately. It's been on my mind a lot because I've been thinking a lot about sinister things that were set in motion in the 80s in the United States and how they're bearing rancid fruit now. And I am constantly thinking about the allegories in Barbarian in this day and age. And I think Zach Cregger was really onto something there.
Yeah. What a good film. I think it's on Hulu right now. So go check it out.
If you haven't seen Barbarian, what are you doing? Go watch that film. It rules.
It's so good. Yeah.
Okay. So, my number 4 pick, I wanted to represent a TV show and a show that has been on my mind today because we got a teaser trailer for season 2 is the Apple TV original show Severance, which you might recall was my very first pick ever in episode 1.
Wow.
We recorded it hours after I watched the season 1 Severance finale, and I felt like I could run 40 football fields. I was so excited. That ending was so freaking exciting. We're hanging off of a huge cliff at the end of season 1 of Severance.
When does it come out? Season 2?
January of next year.
All right. I'll watch season 1 by January of next year.
You certainly have time. You certainly have time. This is a series. It's directed by Ben Stiller. It's on Apple TV Plus, like I said. And it stars Adam Scott and Zach Cherry and Christopher Walken, among many other awesome people. It is unlike most shows that I've ever seen, but I think, Kat, you would very much like it because because I know your taste and I know you like Fringe and you like X-Files and you like Control, the video game. It is not exactly like those things, but it is in the same headspace where something is wrong and people are trying to figure out what is wrong, and there's some type of evil corporate bullshit afoot. And basically, if you aren't familiar with Severance, the premise is that we're following a small group of workers at a company where they have voluntarily undergone a procedure where they cannot remember anything about the outside world while they're at work. And then when they're not at work, they can't remember anything about what they did at work. So they basically have split their lives and themselves into two different parts, a work part and an outside work part. Freaking awesome show. There's a lot of funny stuff. There's a lot of serious stuff. There's a lot of romantic stuff. And I think it is directed superbly. It's written superbly and it's acted superbly. And there are a few shows as energizing and stirring and original that are being made right now. So I know it's been a couple years since it's been out, but I still heartily recommend it, and I would love it if you caught up before the second season, Kat, because I love this show. It's a real winner. At least this first season has been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely want to catch up. That would be great. You've been telling me to watch it, and my work friend has been telling me to watch it, and yeah, so I gotta watch it. I gotta get to it. I had forgotten that Ben Stiller was the director of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And cool. You know what? I think Scott would really like it too.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sells it at all.
Yeah. We had talked about it initially when we were playing Control. We were talking about how we thought that it would be kind of in that vein. So yeah, I gotta watch it. That's a great pick. Wow, what a throwback. And that was such a fun episode to do as well, because I covered Stardew Valley, and I remember being like, oh God, is the Venn diagram going to be like impossible? Is this pod going to die on the first episode? And it was so cool because we got to talk about like corporations ruining the world and just like some things that you don't pick up on when you're viewing media through one lens, but when you're trying to think of comparisons between two different pieces of media, it can kind of enlighten you in a totally different way, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I think we drew a great Venn diagram in that first episode, and there were a lot of surprising parallels.
Yeah. I have, speaking of, I've been remastering that episode in my spare time, so expect that one remastered soon. So if you want to listen to that, it'll be coming. Otherwise, go listen to episode 1 and suffer through my bad editing. But yeah, great pick. My number 4 is also a TV show. It is The Haunting of Hill House, which was the 2018 Netflix original series that was directed by Mike Flanagan. We covered that in episode 16.
We did a head-to-head on Mike Flanny, didn't we?
Yeah, that was where we covered Midnight Mass and Hill House. And Hill House is amazing. And it follows a grieving family who is preparing to have a funeral for their sister. And through their grieving process, they also are forced to confront some things from their childhood that happened. They kind of grew up in a haunted house with a complex family dynamic that all kind of comes to a head. And I really like the storytelling in The Haunting of Hill House. Usually I hate kind of time jumps. So we're seeing these kids as kids, and then we're seeing them as adults, and you're not getting the whole story until the very end. And I usually hate that. I don't want to,
Really?
I'm usually less invested in one of the plot lines. And I think that Mike Flanagan balanced them perfectly, where I was interested in the childhood plotline and I was interested in the adult plotline equally. And I loved it. It's such a fantastic show. If you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it more. I go back to it every once in a while. I've probably watched it 3 times at this point. And also, I love the horror trope of like a hungry house that's like trying to lure people in to keep them forever. It's so cool. I mean, you think of The Shining, you think of Hell House by Richard Matheson, I think. and also Burnt Offerings I read recently. And all of those are kind of in that vein. Highly recommend. I think it's really, really interesting to think of like kind of a building being possessed as opposed to just being haunted. So cool. And yeah, it has great scares. I remember like screaming at certain parts in Hill House. And I just like, I remember the scene where they're like driving in the car and you see
you
like,
would probably meant that one.
So scary. It's so good. It has an incredible cast. And I mean, Mike Flanagan just has like my green light. Anytime he puts something out, I'm so excited to watch it. So, and I've also heard rumors that Mike Flanagan might be creating a Dark Tower series. And
really?
I would be stoked to watch that. I think that would be so cool.
Interesting. I heard rumors he's taking over the Exorcist franchise.
I also heard rumors about that. He's a busy guy. I hope he makes time for the Dark Tower. That would be so cool. And I think it's kind of a bear to adapt. So I think a television series would be the best way to do it. But I think it would be divine.
Yeah, he's actually executive producing a film that I've been like invested in for a couple years now. But it's really funny timing, actually. Around the same time we started recording the pod, in the spring of 2022, Chris Stuckman, who is a film commentator on YouTube, he launched a Kickstarter to finance his first feature-length film that he's directing. And I contributed to that Kickstarter, and they got the film, they financed it off of the Kickstarter. It was an exceptionally successful Kickstarter campaign. The film's called Shelby Oaks, and he filmed it, and it's in post-production now, and Mike Flanagan signed on as an executive producer.
That's amazing. When I watched The Empty Man, a lot of the comments were like, Chris Stuckman sent me here. And he has a video on how The Empty Man should have a cult following because it's so good.
He's got so many great film reviews on YouTube. Yeah. Really great. I've been following his channel for a long time, obviously. That's why I was interested in supporting his film. So, yeah, I'm really happy that it's been getting a lot of support.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So far. I can't wait. I think he's been teasing news coming soon, like big news soon, and my hope is that it will be a distributor.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, but yeah, Hill House, that's a great pick. Very emblematic of our horror content that we like to cover, especially in the fall.
Yeah, spooky season.
I love that episode because I got to talk about Midnight Mass.
Midnight Mass.
Which, oh man, for some reason I've been thinking about Hamish Linklater a lot recently.
Yeah, who doesn't? Who doesn't think about him every once in a while?
What a guy. What a freaking actor that guy.
I know.
Put Hamish in everything.
Yeah, I should watch that again. I loved that series.
Love Midnight Mass. There is an audio spike in the Nosferatu trailer that reminds me very much of like the cello spike that they would use in Midnight Mass when a certain guy was around. And it just made me really excited. I was like, hell yeah, this is evocative.
Oh my god, remember Bev Keane?
Oh, fucking Bev Keane.
Fuck Bev Keane.
All time villain right there, Bev Keane.
Yeah. Yikes.
Oh,
yeah.
What a series. Okay. I'm gonna talk about my number 3 pick. And I wanted to include this A because it's one of my favorite pieces of media of all time. And B because it has come up in multiple episodes. And one of those episodes was one featuring M. Grabner Gaddis, our good friend from the Rooted Pod. And this is Phantom Thread, of course, the 2017 film. I have assigned it to episode 40. I believe that's one that M is featured on, where we talked about fungi-related films, but I also included it on our top 5 countdown of comfort media because for some reason I think this is the most comforting movie of all time, and I watch Phantom Thread when I'm really distressed, and I immediately sink into the world and feel soothed and calmed and just like I'm having the best environmental enrichment of all time. If you haven't seen Phantom Thread, I implore you to see it. It's the 2017 film from Paul Thomas Anderson. He wrote and directed it, and it stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Vicky Krieps, 2 of the best actors on this planet. They fucking rock. It's so good. And it is on its face about a clothing designer in London in the previous century and his new love interest, and what it's really about is many, many more things, and a lot of those are control in relationship dynamics. Who's giving control? Who's ceding control? What does that mean for the relationship? And I think you don't really need to know anything at all about it in order to give it a try and enjoy it. It's one of the best films of all time. It looks gorgeous. It looks beautiful. And I kind of hold it in my mind as a gold standard of what I want film to look like in terms of like film grain, in terms of lighting, in terms of shot composition, all of it. It is the gold standard that I hold in my head when I think, well, this looks great, but it doesn't look as good as Phantom Thread.
Yeah.
And so this film means a lot to me, and so it had to appear on this list. And if it sparks your interest, definitely check out our head-to-head pod with M, where we all talked about fungi-related films, or check out our episode about our top 5 comfort media, because that also is just a very revealing episode. Then that's episode 37.
Yeah. And also head on over to Rooted Pod and go listen to the episode where M taught us all about the mushrooms featured in our films. So that was also really cool.
Yeah, we should have M back on soon. I was re-listening to a pod from earlier this year where we talked about maybe having her on to talk about the film Evil Does Not Exist, because it was on my May Remy's radar, and I was telling you how it was described as an eco-thriller, and I went and saw it, and I think it would definitely be something worth talking about with M if she's interested in seeing it.
Yeah, do you know if it's streaming?
Oh, good question. It's coming soon to Apple TV.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm seeing here.
I'll keep an eye out for that. Yeah, that sounds great. Good pick. I still have not gotten around to seeing that either.
Put it on your list of 10.
I know. I've been so bad. I had this whole plan to do Alien Girl Summer and watch a bunch of alien movies that were...
Yeah, and then see Alien Romulus?
Yeah, and I've been really bad, so I need to start doing that. I had, you helped me add to my list. And,
oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, if you're interested, I'll just shout a couple of films that are on my list.
Well, you had a specific modifier, didn't you? It was
they've got to be cozy and just vibes.
Okay, so maybe not Alien Romulus.
I'm still excited for Alien Romulus. I've got E.T. on here. I've got Signs on here. I've got No One Will Save You on here. That's so good. Independence Day. Arrival. The Thing. The Thing's not really cozy, but I think it's cozy because it's 80s horror. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which my theater was actually showing this weekend, but I couldn't get it for free. So that sucked. Asteroid City. That's a great alien movie.
Perfect.
Cozy alien movie. Attack the Block. And I'm halfway through First Contact, but I got really sad when her dad dies. So I cried a little too much and then had to stop. But yeah, so join me for Alien Girl Summer and let me know what you think of my list. Yeah. Anyways, I'll add it to my list. I think it's been on my top, my list of 10, but I've done that. Yeah, so my number 3 pick is another television show. It's The Good Place. And I discussed this on episode 68. 68? And I loved this show. I binged it. I needed something just feel good and cozy to watch. And I just think that it is the perfect mix of goofy characters, interesting philosophical concepts, processing existential crises. Just so good. Everything about it's just so good. And the general premise of the show is that Eleanor Shellstrop, who is played by Kristen Bell, dies and she goes to the good place. And she knows that she is not where she belongs because she knows that she was a trash human being when she was on Earth. And she was super mean and not nice and just she knows that she doesn't belong here with these philanthropists and people who did a lot of good in the world. And she, instead of fessing up to this, she doesn't want to go to hell, or the bad place. She makes friends, and especially friends with Chidi, who's a philosopher, and asks him to teach her how to be a better person so that she does belong in the good place. And that's the premise of the first season. So things kind of get switched up after a while. But if you're in need of just a really cute, fun, easy watch, I highly recommend The Good Place. The last season made me cry a lot. And it's funny, I was actually just watching, my YouTube algorithm served me, it's not a new podcast, but it's a podcast I hadn't ever listened to before. And it was, I want to say Smosh Reads Reddit or something. I can't remember, but they were talking about, they were doing a sitcom game show. And one of the guys on the game show said that he loved The Good Place and cried a lot. And I was like, me, I feel that.
No, I think a lot of people are with you on that for sure. Yeah, I love how they wrapped up that show. That they landed the plane on that, in my opinion. So good. For sure. Danson, he is out of control, out of this world, Ted Danson. What an entertainer that man. How the hell is he so good?
He's so good. Incredible.
Incredible. You know who else is incredible on that show?
Who?
Jason Mantzoukas, obviously. Derek, of course. The best side character on the show is Derek. He rocks.
So good. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I saw Janet once in New York.
No way.
Just in passing. Looked a lot like her.
Cool. She's awesome.
But yeah, I really love media that helps me think about death in a more positive light because I have a lot of fears of death and anxieties about death. And I think The Good Place is one of those that just helps me think about it a little differently. And I love that.
That's awesome. You should watch It's Such a Beautiful Day, the Don Hertzfeldt film that I talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I think that falls into that exact category of, it made me feel better about death. And I don't think about it constantly, but that film is excellent.
And I have something that can play Blu-ray, so I'm part of the bougie class.
Bougie class. The bougie Blu-ray class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good pick. Very fun. Okay, so then I will move on to my number 2 pick, which you'll have to tell me if this is going to go on your list or not, but it's the 2022 film from Jordan Peele. It's Nope.
It's not on my list.
Well, you should think about it.
On my Alien Girl Summer list? Oh, yeah. It is on my Alien Girl Summer list, yeah.
Oh, excellent then.
I thought you meant on my top 5. I was like, I didn't cover that.
No. Spoiler, it does have aliens in it.
It does have aliens.
I think you probably know that by now, everyone.
Oh my god.
We covered this in episode 9, back in the summer of 2022. And I was so freaking jazzed about this movie. I absolutely loved it. It ended up being my top film of 2022, and it was so exciting to see it in the theater and then know I was going to come back and talk to you about it on the pod.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely loved it. I love when I'm at the movie theater in the Dolby room now, and the little advertisement for Dolby Atmos shows clips from Nope, and I'm just like, holy shit, I wish I was watching Nope in this room right
Yes.
now.
Absolutely.
It is a gorgeous film. It's a wonderful film. It's got so much to dissect in it, and that's one of my favorite features of a film, is having a lot to dig into and a lot to think about and a lot to interpret. And Nope has all of that, and I think it is, God, it's one of the best films from this decade so far. And if you're interested in the plot, a very brief synopsis is that Daniel Kaluuya's character and Keke Palmer's character are siblings, and they live on a horse farm where horses are trained to appear in Hollywood films. And some very suspicious stuff starts happening in the sky over their horse ranch, and they have to get a freaking crew together to do something about it. Yeah. And, oh my God, I love this film. I haven't watched it in a minute. I need to revisit it. I just wish every time I revisit it, it could be on the big screen, because this is one of those films that you must see big. Hoyte van Hoytema did the photography. I love him. And we both love Jordan Peele. And I think this has become my favorite Jordan Peele film. And I couldn't not have it on the list.
Yeah, totally agree. It's also got a great sense of humor. It's like,
oh yeah.
I mean, all of Jordan Peele's films do, but this is really reminiscent of like an early 2000s adventure movie for me, where it's just a popcorn movie. There's like moments where it's scary, but it's like a popcorn movie grew up.
Yeah.
It's
Don't
so
forget
good.
about Gordy, though.
Gordy.
Watch out for Gordy.
Wild. Yeah, that film was so good. I had another thought. Oh, yeah. The guy from the Best Buy adjacent company is going to be in Twisters, which I'm really excited about.
I was also thinking about that on the side. I was like, everything is this nexus of things we're talking about is all coming together. Let me just shout out his name really quick.
Yeah. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Brandon Perea.
Yeah, he's amazing.
His character's name in Twisters is Boone, if you're wondering.
So this is a really funny coincidence.
Oh boy.
I don't have Nope on my list, but I do have Fringe on my list at the number 2 slot, which we covered on that exact same episode.
Whoa.
So this was covered.
What a pairing. Incredible stuff.
This was covered on episode 9, and it was remastered for episode 75, so go check that out. Fringe is it ebbs and it flows as an obsession for me. I kind of have my moments where I've got the urge to start it all from the beginning, and I love it. I love that show. I could watch it any day of the week. The show revolves around a special task force for the FBI that largely investigates bioterrorism, but some other unexplained events as well. And this is called the Fringe Division, which is where the show gets its name. It was created by J.J. Abrams, and it's a fantastic show. It's got kind of like a monster of the week type setup. It's not always a monster, but it's always some kind of like
mystery
interesting
of the week,
mystery. Yeah. So fantastic. I think the cast is just stellar, and it's got Anna Torv as Olivia Dunham. It's got Joshua Jackson as Peter Bishop. And yeah, so just the Fringe Division is made up of Olivia Dunham, who's an FBI agent, It's also got Walter Bishop, who's kind of this mad scientist character, and his son, Peter, who is a very, very smart guy who's been kind of conning his way through life up until this point. And this is kind of a second chance to build a relationship with his dad, but also kind of form a real not con man life. And then it's also got, I think it's like a junior FBI agent, Astrid Farnsworth, and also a cow named Jean. And so I'm obsessed with the show. I can't get enough of it. It's so funny. It's so poignant at moments. It's another show that kind of, I love what it has to say about being able to forgive people and form new relationships with them. And I think it's got just so much to dig into. I don't know. I can't recommend it more highly. I recommend this to people all the time. It's a little scary if you've got kids, but I think that older children could definitely handle it. It's not like super adult or anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just a timeless format. It's kind of like X-Files in that you just get a good case every week.
Yeah, I remember watching this on TV when it was first coming out and really enjoying it. And I know that you know that Will loves Fringe as well. And sometimes when we're out in public, he'll see a bald guy and he'll be like, that's an observer.
I love that.
And I'll be like, leave that poor man alone.
Oh my God.
So Fringe is alive and well in our hearts.
Yeah. I've been making Scott watch it with me. We haven't watched it in a while, but we've gotten a decent way through it. So hopefully we'll pick it back up again. It's definitely worth the watch though. And it's aged well, I think. The special effects and stuff don't look shitty or anything. So yeah, 10 out of 10, highly recommend.
Excellent. Yeah. How could it not be on the list? Okay, well, it's time for my number one pick.
Number one!
I just went with my heart. I was like, what is something that I love deeply that I probably would not have been able to talk about unless I had my very own podcast where I choose the topics to talk about? And obviously, it's my deeply beloved 1971 film, Wake and Fright.
Oh, yes.
Where else are you going to hear me talk about Wake and Fright but this podcast?
Wake and Fright.
Wake and Fright. I love Wake and Fright. It is directed by Ted Kotcheff, and it stars Donald Pleasance and Gary Bond. And it follows Gary Bond's character, who is trying to traverse the Australian outback, but he gets caught in the Yabba, a small mining town where the locals are very friendly, but also maybe a little bit sinister. And he has some mishaps and goes into a spiral and talks to one of my favorite characters in all of fiction, which is Donald Pleasance's character, Doc Tyden. And I love this film. I think it is an underseen classic, and I enjoy it. Is one of the most rewatchable films. I am the opposite of you in that I don't rewatch things very much at all. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that I've seen more than a couple of times, it means I really like it. And Wake and Fright and Phantom Thread are definitely up there with some of my most... They are probably my most two rewatch films in my adult life. Mm-hmm. And it's, again, similar to what I was saying for Nope. What I really like about it is it gives you a lot to think about and deduce and interpret. And it is a great commentary on human nature and social groups. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend anyone check out Wake and Fright if you are at all interested in it. Every time I watch it, I get very thirsty and I want to drink beer.
I was just going to ask
all
you.
they drink in Wake
Yeah.
and Fright. Particularly beer with tomato juice, which Will and I will break out for our semi-annual Wake and Fright rewatches. Because you have to get in the spirit. You got to feel like you're in the Yabba. There's the second heat wave of the summer already is bearing down on New York City, so it's feeling like Wake and Fright weather right now. And I just love this film, and I chose it as my number one because I love that this podcast gives me a platform to talk about these things that I think deserve more love and more conversation. And even if one person hears about Wake and Fright when they wouldn't have otherwise, then I am absolutely thrilled. And so that's why I chose it.
Without you. That's a great pick, yeah. I've still got to watch that too.
Well, they just released a 4K restoration on Blu-ray, so
I've got to just
throw that in the Blu-ray player.
Gotta get all my Blu-rays.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Ooh. Maybe we'll have to watch it together and do beer and tomato juice and Wake and Fright night.
Wake and Fright. Wake and Fright. Wake and Fright.
That would be really fun.
That'd be phenomenal.
Sweet. Yeah. My number one. It is About Time, which was directed by Richard Curtis. It's a 2013 film, and when I was going through the list of episodes in preparation for this episode, I saw our head-to-head that we did where we talked about Time and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It was in our summer series last year where we did summer romance, or not necessarily summer romance, but just romance movies. And whenever I think about Time, it just like gives me this, I went with my heart, just like you said. It just gives me like this really warm, happy feeling. I really love that film. I find it very like, when I say this, it's going to sound weird, but aspirational and inspiring. And I've got a very specific reason for that. But just to summarize the general premise really quick, it follows Tim, who turns 21. He's played by Domhnall Gleeson. And we know that I fucking love Domhnall Gleeson. He's in Ex Machina. He's in that episode of Black Mirror, Be Right Back, that I love. Anyways, yeah. He turns 21 and his dad tells him that he is able to travel through time. And he doesn't believe him. His dad's played by Bill Nighy.
Yes,
incredible performance from Bill Nighy.
Love him.
Love every second he's on screen, honestly.
Every second. One of the all-time great dads on screen.
So good. And yeah, to me, it's kind of like this coming of age story very late. It's Domhnall Gleeson's character kind of falling in love, creating a life with somebody, kind of coming to terms with this gift and kind of realizing that in some ways it's a curse. And I just love watching him try to problem solve in real time. There's a lot of like cuts where he's going back in time to like change one line of dialogue that he says, or try to solve some issue for his friend before it happens. And a lot of it's just like goofy and small things, but then there's big things too. And it kind of talks about some really heavy topics. His relationship with his sister is really powerful, and he kind of goes back in time to prevent something really bad from happening to her, and it has massive consequences on his own life. He has to eventually process the death of his father, which is just one of the saddest scenes in any movie. It just absolutely has me racking with sobs every time. And I love that. I think that that's powerful. I think that I just love that movie can bring so much emotion out of me. And I think that it's really meaningful. And when I think of this movie, I said that I find it very aspirational and inspiring. And a lot of that is summarized in the very end of the film, where Tim is saying that he never really travels back in time anymore. And he says, I just try to live every day as if I've deliberately come back to this one day to enjoy it, as if it was the full final day of my extraordinary, ordinary life. And I think that that very overtly states kind of the main message, and how if we just thought of all of the little things in our day that go wrong as not being that important in the overall picture, I think that we could enjoy the day a lot more and be more appreciative and be a better person. And I think it's just like a very almost meditative thought to have. Yeah. And so every time I watch that film, I kind of think about that. And yeah, I love everything about that film. It's got Margot Robbie in it.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love her.
That's the first time I think I saw Margot Robbie.
I think so. I think me too. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great film. I highly recommend it. I mean, I think it's definitely in line with like The Time Traveler's Wife. Obviously, both of those star Rachel McAdams.
Strangely, yes.
Being typecast as a love interest to a time traveler. But I just think that Time Traveler's Wife is just a little too heavy for me. It makes me feel very sad in not a good way. And it feels very tragic, whereas this feels very hopeful. And About Time is just one of my favorite movies. I've got to update my letterbox to include this if it doesn't on my top 4. I don't think it does, but I just absolutely love this movie.
We gotta do more head-to-head series.
I know. Yes.
That was so fun.
Yeah, I love that. You should pick Wake and Fright for one so that I have to watch it.
Oh my god, yes. Well, I mean, it could fit if we're doing fall head-to-heads, and they're like nuance categories on horror and or darker vibe movies.
Descent into Madness.
The Descent.
Did you have honorable mentions that you wanted to shout?
I didn't. I just was like, you know what? It's gonna be a clean top 5.
That's fair.
I mean, fair. I love all the things that I've talked about.
I know.
That's why they appear on the show. So don't take this top 5 too seriously as saying these things are better than anything else I've ever covered. I just kind of wanted to say, hey, these were great things that I loved talking about, and everything that I've talked about is awesome and worth checking out. That's why I bring them to the pod.
Totally. Yeah. The only things that I wanted to shout, I didn't include any books on my list. Those ended up in my honorable mentions. So 3 of my favorite books, well, 3 book-related points I have are Book Lovers, which we discussed on episode 42. It's Emily Henry's novel that it really loved. You talked about Beach Read, and that's one of my favorite episodes I think that we've ever done. I really enjoyed recording that episode. I also have on this list The Twisted Ones, which was a horror novel by T. Kingfisher that I covered on episode 20. And I think about that one a lot. Ooh. Like, I think that the horror imagery in it was just really great and eerie, but still kind of having that, like, kind of pop horror that you could revisit. It's not, like, super heavy where you're like, I will never read that book again. It kind of, I don't know, it feels like you could read it again. And then in the same vein, anything by Rachel Harrison, I adore. I covered her novel Black Sheep in episode 62 and Such Sharp Teeth in episode 88. I've also talked repeatedly about her novel The Return, which you can hear me talk about on those episodes. But I love that her novels feel so down to earth. Her characters feel so grounded, and it just feels like you could pick up that book and read it over and over again. It's not like heavy horror in that way, which I just love. I love a comfort spooky read. But yeah, so those are my honorable mentions. But yeah, great picks. That was a fun episode.
Yeah, I loved looking back on on all of these and remembering
what
was going on when we talked about them.
I can't believe that we've talked about so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad we have this pod, and I'm really glad that you do it with me.
Me too. I love our pod.
You're a great co-host.
You're a great co-host.
But yeah, so thank you to our listeners. And if you're new here, we're happy to have you. And here's to our 3rd year of podcasting.
Another year. Thanks for joining us this week on Friend Diagram. Thank you to Tyler Seek for the creation of our intro and outro music. Did you take any of our recommendations? Have any thoughts on the show? Let us know at frienddiagrampod@gmail.com, and we might read your email on a future episode. If you can, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice, and we'll see you back here, same place next week. Bye for now.